All right, pace setters. So we're going to continue right along, moving into section 3. We're going to be talking about how this crisis is going to deepen in the United States over really that issue of slavery. If you recall, last section we were finishing off by looking at the Brooks Sumner incident. We talked about how Charles Sumner from the north, from Massachusetts, he gets beaten over the head with a cane by Preston Brooks from the South. And we kind of left off by saying that in 1856, things are just really messed up in the country. We looked last section at really four important events, starting in 1850, talking about the Compromise of 1850, then moving on, looking at the publication of Uncle Tom's Cabin, and then looking at the last two pieces here, Kansas-Nebraska Act put forth by Stephen Douglas, and then that Brooks Sumner incident, as I had just mentioned. Moving forward here in section 3, we're going to be talking about four more events that are also just piling on top of the other four, leading in this decade to the eventual outcome of the American Civil War. Those four events are going to eventually be the Dred Scott Decision, Lincoln-Douglas debates. We start to see our guy Abraham Lincoln coming to the spotlight. John Brown is back again. He's raiding weapons facilities in Virginia. And then the eventual election here of Lincoln as President of the United States. Now, we had mentioned, and I kind of want to start off here, that in 1856, while things are really messed up, that Franklin Pierce, the president at the time from the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party is actually going to decline to re-nominate him. So he's only going to serve one term. The Democratic Party's like, nah, you weren't that great. We're going to go in a different direction. And so we see that in the election of 1856, that there are three men running for the presidency. You have James Buchanan running for the Democratic Party. You have John C. Fremont running as a Republican, the Republican Party running for the first time in a presidential election. And if you recall, Fremont is that man who helped in California during the Mexican-American War under that Bear Flag Rebellion. And then you have a third party here, Millard Fillmore, running under the Know Nothing Party. And we see what ends up happening is Fremont and Fillmore, they kind of split the northern vote. And you can see Fremont wins a lot of those northern states, Fillmore winning Maryland here. But it allows Buchanan to kind of take the majority of the South. And so we see, with only 45% of the popular vote, Buchanan wins all of those states and wins quite handedly in that electoral vote. So James Buchanan, he goes on to become the 15th president there. Notice, only serves one term, similar to Pierce. Things just don't go very well during his 4 years. In fact, the north-south sectional turmoil is actually going to worsen during his presidency. So again, things don't go that well for Buchanan. Fun fact though, Buchanan, he is the only president that we have had who has been single while he has been in the White House. So he entered the White House without marrying, was kind of a bachelor his whole time while in the White House. Now, the first event that I want to discuss is the Dred Scott Decision. And 3 days after Buchanan is elected president, the Supreme Court is going to hand down a very important decision between a slave, Dred Scott, against his master, his owner, Sanford. Now, what happens is this. Dred Scott, his master takes him to the Wisconsin territories and to states such as Illinois, where technically slavery is illegal. So he is brought to these places in the north where he is going to live with his master for quite a few years. And it's going to lead Scott to say, well, hey, slavery is illegal here. And so Dred Scott is going to actually sue his master for his freedom. So Dred Scott takes it upon himself to attempt to sue his master for his freedom. Now, things don't go very well for Dred Scott or for abolitionists as a whole. Is that the decision in this Supreme Court case is actually going to be a big blow to the anti-slavery movement, because the Chief Justice at the time, Roger Taney, is going to really say two things that are fundamentally going to change the country. His first thing he says in his decision in this court ruling is people of African descent, which includes Dred Scott, they are not allowed to be United States citizens. That slaves are property, and property do not have the rights of United States citizens. Therefore, Dred Scott doesn't even have the right to sue his master. So, in essence, the case is thrown out just by that decision. But the Chief Justice goes even further, and he actually says that Congress, they are not allowed to forbid slavery in any federal territories. Basically saying that any of those territories out west that have yet to become states, those territories are open to slavery by this one Supreme Court decision, Supreme Court case that is being laid out. So the Dred Scott v. Sanford Supreme Court case is going to be a huge win for the South and for the expansion of slavery. Now, quick little review here. When we think of our government, it's really the legislative branch that make laws. But occasionally you get instances such as Dred Scott v. Sanford where judges in essence make laws of their own, right? So in this case, Roger Taney, the Chief Justice, he's overturning certain things that fundamentally change aspects of the country. And so again, big win for the South, but a very big blow for those free northern states. And we see that those in the North, they begin to feel that there's this like slave power conspiracy going on, that the levers of government are being controlled by the South and pro-slavery individuals in the government. And so there's kind of this paranoia in the North that they're scared that slavery is going to continue to spread to all parts of the country. Now, one of the men who is going to be outraged by this decision is actually going to be a lawyer from Illinois by the name of Abraham Lincoln. And very shortly after this, Lincoln is going to actually challenge Stephen Douglas for his Senate seat in the United States Senate. And a few little things. So Douglas, if you recall, he's the man who put forth the Kansas-Nebraska Act. He is from the Democratic Party. Lincoln, on the other hand, is going to join that new Republican Party. He is going to be the Republican challenger here. And if you recall, Stephen Douglas, he is for popular sovereignty. Settlers moving into these territories, they're the ones who will decide if that territory eventually becomes a free state or a slave state. On the other hand, the Republican Party, they are for free soil policies, essentially saying we want to stop the expansion of slavery into these territories. Slavery can still exist, it just needs to exist in the South, but we don't want to see it expand to those other territories that have yet to become states. So Lincoln and Douglas, they are going to be on the campaign trail, and they are going to have a series of debates where they are arguing back and forth over different positions. Now, at the end of the day, Stephen Douglas is going to win. He's going to win and reclaim his Senate seat, but he's going to actually lose a lot of his popularity with the Democratic Party. And at the same time, Lincoln is going to be catapulted onto the national stage. He's going to become kind of the central political figure in this fight against the expansion of slavery. And it's going to help him in 2 years when he eventually runs for the presidency. Now, it is during this time when Lincoln is going to give one of his very famous speeches called the House Divided speech. And if you look at this word cloud here, the bigger the word, the more times it pops up in his speech. And so when you look at this word cloud, you'll notice things like state, talking about different state rights, talks about the Constitution quite a bit, but talks about decisions that must be made, most likely decisions over slavery. We will see, obviously talks about the people quite a bit as well. Now, during his speech, his main point is this. He says that the United States is not able to exist if it remains half slave and half free. He says that at some point, the country must become all free states or all slave states, that they just cannot coexist. And he's kind of a prophet in some instances, because we know that in 2 years, the country eventually is going to fight a war over this very fact. Now, shortly here after the Lincoln-Douglas debates, the focus is going to shift to John Brown. If you recall John Brown, he is that man who, in Kansas, he attacked many of those pro-slavery settlers and massacred many at Potawatomi Creek. He flees Kansas to the northeast, and it is here in the northeast, specifically Virginia, where he's going to hatch another abolitionist plan. So in 1859, he is going to have this brilliant plan in his mind to seize weapons from a United States Army arsenal in Virginia, specifically Harpers Ferry. Harpers Ferry today is located in West Virginia. But his idea is this: we are going to steal these United States weapons. We then are going to give these weapons to slaves, and we are going to start a slave rebellion in the South. That is his brilliant plan. He's actually successful in raiding the federal arsenal and stealing these weapons, but he eventually is going to be surrounded by a young Robert E. Lee, and eventually some of his men are going to be killed, and he himself is going to be captured. So Brown, he's captured. He eventually is tried for treason against the United States, and he is going to be executed. And you can see a picture here. This is John Brown as he is leaving the jail to eventually be hung. John Brown, a very polarizing figure, right? As he is being executed, those in the North are going to ring bells in support of John Brown. They love the fact that he is an abolitionist fighting for the ending of slavery. However, we're going to see that those in the South begin to have a paranoia of their own. They are going to start to see all Northerners as these John Brown types who are attempting to cause these slave revolts and rebellions in the South and end their Southern way of life. And again, if you recall, the North has paranoia of their own. They're feeling as though the levers of government are out there to expand slavery to all reaches of the country. So you have the country in 1859 on the, kind of the brink of war, and that's really what it is. You have both sides who are just paranoid that the other is attempting to end their way of life. And we see that in 1860, with the election of Abraham Lincoln to the presidency, this powder keg of sorts is going to explode into the American Civil War. And if you look at the electoral map here for 1860, the tables have kind of turned. For some odd reason, the Democratic Party is going to put forth 3 different candidates. So you have Stephen Douglas here, he's from the Democratic Party. You have Breckinridge and Bell, who are also from the Democratic Party. And what happens is, notice they split kind of the southern states here. You have Breckinridge, who wins the Deep South. You have Bell, who wins Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee. And you have Douglas, who wins Missouri. That allows Lincoln to win all of those free northern states. And so if we look at the popular vote over here, Lincoln only gets 40% of the popular vote. But because the Democrats split all of those southern states and allows Lincoln to gain all of the northern states, Lincoln's actually going to win the electoral vote quite handedly. Now, with Lincoln becoming the 16th president of the United States, it's going to cause those deep southern states to secede from the Union. 7. 7 of those southern states are going to leave the United States of America, or they believe to be leaving the United States of America. And we're going to see that it is with this move that we are on the brink of war. Now, if you take a look at this map, what you'll see is as soon as Lincoln is elected president, South Carolina is the first to secede, then Mississippi, then Florida, then we're going to see Alabama secedes. Then you notice Georgia and Louisiana, eventually Texas. So those are those first 7 states that secede simply with the election of Abraham Lincoln. They go on to form what are called the Confederate States of America. After this, we're going to see some of the first shots that are fired at Fort Sumter in South Carolina. But then with that, we also begin to see Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina. They all eventually join the Confederacy as well. And now the Civil War has really begun. Now we see a lot of the fighting occur. Now, if you continue to watch the map change here, it does go through all of the Civil War to 1865, but it also show you after the war is over and the Union has won. You notice right now the states now are going to eventually be readmitted to the Union one by one. This period of readmitting the states who seceded is something known as Reconstruction, which we'll get to as well after we discuss the Civil War.
John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave, but his soul goes marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. But his soul goes marching on.